A millionaire executive prepares to sign a billion-dollar deal at a luxury hotel. Behind the scenes, a poor girl overhears mobsters in disguise speaking in Italian about how they are going to kill him. Despite her fear, she bursts into the room and interrupts destiny with a warning that changes everything. What was supposed to be an ambush becomes the beginning of a story that no one could have predicted. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching us from. We'll keep going. Alexander Hayes stood at the window of the Grand Plaza Hotel's presidential suite, watching Manhattan's skyline glitter in the late afternoon sun. His reflection stared back at him. Impeccable navy suit, silver tie, and the stern expression that had graced countless business magazines. At 48, he'd built Hayes Enterprises from a small tech startup into a global empire valued at billions. Today's merger would be his crowning achievement, a $3.4 billion deal that would revolutionize the tech industry. His phone buzzed with a message from his assistant. Board members arriving in 30 minutes, conference room prepared as requested. Alexander sent a brief acknowledgement and checked his watch, an heirloom passed down from his grandfather. Time had always been a commodity for him, something to maximize and exploit. Every minute of his day was calculated for optimal efficiency. 12 floors below in the hotel's service corridor, 7-year-old Emma Parker sat cross-legged on a maintenance cart, carefully coloring in her sketchbook. Her honey-brown curls fell across her face as she concentrated, her tongue peeking out between her teeth. Her mother, Jessica Parker, pushed the cart of cleaning supplies further down the hallway, stopping at room 2456. "Stay right here, sweetie," Jessica whispered, tucking a stray curl behind Emma's ear. "I've got 3 more rooms to clean and then we'll go home." Emma nodded solemnly, used to the routine. Since Jessica had taken the job at the Grand Plaza 6 months ago, Emma had spent many afternoons like this, waiting quietly while her mother worked. The hotel's childcare center was only for guests, and after-school care had become too expensive since Jessica's hours were cut. "I'll be super quiet, Mom," Emma promised, holding up her sketchbook. "I'm drawing a dragon unicorn princess who protects her castle from mean knights." Jessica smiled, though the worry lines around her eyes remained. "That's beautiful, honey. Remember, don't talk to strangers, don't wander off, stay on the cart," Emma recited, having heard the rules countless times. With a quick kiss on Emma's forehead, Jessica disappeared into the hotel room, leaving the door slightly ajar. Emma continued coloring, occasionally glancing at the ornate hallway decorations. The Grand Plaza was unlike anything in their neighborhood. Everything gleamed with polish and wealth. 20 minutes later, Emma's crayon stilled as she heard voices around the corner. 2 men in dark suits appeared, speaking in hushed, urgent tones. They wore the same uniform as the hotel security, but something about their stiff posture made Emma shrink back behind the cart. "The operation is confirmed for tonight," the taller man said, checking his watch. "Hayes won't know what hit him." "Westbrook wants this done clean," the second man replied. "Once we access his laptop during the gala dinner, we'll have everything we need to take him down. The algorithm will be ours." "What about his security team?" "Already handled. They'll be distracted by a staged situation in the lobby. Hayes will be completely exposed." Emma's heart raced. She didn't understand everything, but she recognized the name Hayes. Her grandmother had shown her his picture in a magazine once, saying he was one of the richest men in America. The men didn't sound like they wanted to help Mr. Hayes. They sounded like the villains in her storybooks. The men continued walking, disappearing around another corner. Emma slipped off the cart, clutching her sketchbook to her chest. Her mother had told her not to wander, but this seemed important. In her favorite books, the brave children always helped when adults were in trouble. She navigated the service corridor she'd memorized over months of accompanying her mother, making her way to the executive floor. The plush carpet muffled her footsteps as she approached the conference room, where voices echoed through the partially open door. Inside, Alexander Hayes was reviewing documents with 2 assistants, preparing for the board meeting. His voice was firm as he discussed projected earnings and market positions. Emma hesitated at the doorway, suddenly aware of how small she was in this world of important adults. But the memory of the men's conversation pushed her forward. She knocked timidly on the doorframe. The conversation inside halted abruptly. Alexander looked up, his piercing blue eyes landing on the small figure at the door. "How did you get up here?" one of the assistants asked, rising from her seat. Emma swallowed hard. "I need to talk to Mr. Hayes. It's really important." Alexander raised an eyebrow, studying the child with her worn jeans and faded t-shirt. "This is a restricted floor, young lady. Where are your parents?" "My mum works here. She's cleaning rooms," Emma explained, then added with urgency, "But I heard something bad. Some men who look like security but aren't real security were talking about you. They said operation, and take him down, and something about an algorithm and a laptop." The assistants exchanged skeptical glances, but Alexander's expression shifted subtly. After 25 years in business, he'd developed an instinct for threats. Industrial espionage wasn't uncommon in his world, and Westbrook Technologies, his fiercest competitor, had been suspiciously aggressive about acquiring his new encryption algorithm. "What's your name?" he asked, his tone gentler than before. "Emma Parker, sir. I'm 7 3/4. Alexander gestured for her to come closer. "Tell me exactly what you heard, Emma." As Emma recounted the conversation in detail, Alexander's instincts sharpened. The girl's account was too specific to be imagination. He pressed the intercom button on the conference phone. "Davis, I need you in the Platinum conference room immediately. Bring Reynolds." He turned to his assistants. "Cancel the board meeting. Move it to the secondary location. No digital communications. Call them directly." Within minutes, Alexander's head of security, Marcus Davis, arrived with his deputy. Alexander briefed them quickly, watching their expressions turn from skepticism to concern. "The girl could have overheard anything," his assistant suggested. "Or she could have overheard exactly what she says," Alexander countered. "Westbrook has been after our quantum encryption technology for months. The merger announcement today would make it nearly impossible for them to compete." Davis nodded grimly. "We'll do a full sweep and security audit immediately. I'll also pull the surveillance footage to identify these men." As the security team mobilized, Emma stood awkwardly by the door, suddenly uncertain about her role in this adult drama. Alexander noticed her discomfort and approached, kneeling to her eye level. "You did the right thing coming to me, Emma. That was very brave." She shifted from foot to foot. "My mom's going to be worried. I'm supposed to stay on the cart." Alexander checked his watch. "We'll find your mother and explain." He paused, studying her more carefully. "How did you know who I was? My grandma showed me your picture in a magazine. She said you built computers that changed the world." Emma hesitated, then added, "She also said rich people don't notice people like us." The candid observation caught Alexander off guard. Before he could respond, Davis returned with urgent news. "Sir, we've identified 2 unauthorized individuals with falsified security credentials. They've been accessing restricted areas for the past week." As security protocols escalated around him, Alexander made a split-second decision. He turned to Emma. "I need to handle this situation. Would you mind waiting in my office with Ms. Bennett? It's safer there, and we'll find your mother right away." Emma nodded solemnly, following Alexander's assistant to the adjacent office. As the door closed behind her, she couldn't help but feel she'd stepped into a different world, one where her voice had actually mattered. Alexander watched her go, struck by the irony that a child had potentially saved his company from disaster. He turned back to Davis, his expression hardening with resolve. "Lock down all systems. No one accesses any company devices until we've secured the building. And find out everything you can about these imposters. I want to know who sent them." The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. Hotel security worked alongside Alexander's private team to identify and apprehend the imposters. By evening, they had detained 2 men with sophisticated counterfeit credentials and discovered specialized hacking equipment in their possession. The security breach was contained, but Alexander's sense of vulnerability lingered. Jessica Parker had been frantic when she couldn't find Emma. When security located her and explained the situation, her panic turned to a complex mixture of pride and concern. Now, as the immediate crisis subsided, Alexander invited both Emma and Jessica to his suite to properly thank them. "I don't know how to express my gratitude," Alexander said, sitting across from them in the suite's living area. "What Emma overheard was an attempted corporate espionage operation. These men were trying to steal proprietary technology that my company has spent years developing." Jessica sat stiffly on the edge of the plush sofa, her hotel uniform making her look out of place against the luxury surroundings. "Emma knows she shouldn't have wandered off," she said, her voice tight with lingering anxiety. "I'm sorry for any disruption she caused." "Disruption?" Alexander raised an eyebrow. Mrs. Parker, your daughter potentially saved my company from a devastating breach. That's not a disruption. It's extraordinary. Emma, who had been quietly sipping apple juice, looked up. I just did what the kids in my books would do. They always help when they hear bad guys planning stuff. Alexander smiled, perhaps his first genuine smile of the day. Well, I'm grateful you're such a good listener. He turned back to Jessica. I'd like to offer you both something in appreciation. Perhaps a college fund for Emma? Jessica straightened her shoulders, pride momentarily overcoming her discomfort. That's very generous, Mr. Hayes, but unnecessary. I'm just relieved Emma is safe and that she was able to help. Alexander studied her carefully, the dark circles under her eyes, the way her uniform had been meticulously maintained despite its age, the protective posture toward her daughter. He recognized the dignity of someone working hard to maintain independence. At least let me offer you dinner, he said, gesturing to the dining area. The hotel chef can prepare whatever you'd like. It's been a long day for all of us. Jessica hesitated, then nodded when Emma's eyes lit up at the suggestion. As they moved to the dining table, Alexander observed their interaction, Jessica's gentle guidance, Emma's animated chatter about her drawings. There was a warmth between them that felt foreign to him, a simple joy in each other's company that his wealth had never provided. Over dinner, Emma gradually overcame her shyness, regaling Alexander with stories about her school, her drawings, and her dreams of becoming an astronaut artist who would paint the stars up close. Jessica occasionally tried to temper her daughter's enthusiasm, but Alexander waved away her concerns. It's refreshing to hear someone speak without an agenda, he said. In my world, every conversation is a negotiation. Even with your family? Jessica asked, then immediately looked embarrassed for prying. Alexander's expression closed slightly. I'm not married. My parents passed some years ago. The company is my family now. An awkward silence fell, broken when Emma asked innocently, Don't you get lonely in this big hotel room all by yourself? Emma, Jessica admonished gently. It's all right, Alexander said, surprising himself with his candor. Sometimes I do, yes, but I'm usually too busy to notice. As the evening progressed, Alexander found himself increasingly intrigued by this glimpse into a life so different from his own. Jessica gradually revealed pieces of their story, how she'd moved to New York 3 years ago after leaving an unhealthy relationship, her struggle to find affordable housing, her determination to give Emma stability despite working 2 jobs. We manage, she said simply when Alexander expressed concern about her workload. Emma's a good kid. She understands when things are tight. Mom makes it like an adventure, Emma added loyally. When the heat didn't work last winter, we built a blanket fort and pretended we were explorers in the Arctic. Jessica flushed. We had a small issue with our heating that the landlord eventually fixed, she clarified, clearly uncomfortable having their hardships exposed. Later, as Jessica excused herself to use the bathroom, Alexander found himself alone with Emma. The child studied him with unnerving directness. Why do you look sad when you smile? She asked, tilting her head. Alexander blinked, caught off guard by the observation. Do I? Emma nodded seriously. My teacher says eyes tell the truth even when mouths don't. Your mouth smiles, but your eyes stay worried. Before Alexander could formulate a response, Jessica returned, apologizing for keeping Emma out so late. She has school tomorrow, and I have an early shift at my second job. Of course, Alexander said, standing. Let me arrange a car to take you home. That's not necessary. We can take the subway. Please, I insist. It's the least I can do. As they waited for the car to arrive, Alexander made a decision. He handed Jessica his business card with his private number written on the back. If you ever need anything at all, please call me directly. I mean it. Jessica accepted the card with hesitation. Thank you for your kindness, Mr. Hayes. Alexander, please. She nodded, a small smile warming her tired features. Thank you, Alexander. After they left, Alexander stood at the window of his suite, watching the city lights. The attempted corporate sabotage should have been his focus, but instead he found himself thinking about blanket forts and a child who noticed sad eyes behind smiles. The next morning, Alexander walked into the emergency board meeting with renewed purpose. The directors had gathered, faces grave with concern about the security breach. Gentlemen, ladies, he began, standing at the head of the table. Yesterday, we narrowly avoided a catastrophic breach of our security. Our competitors at Westbrook Technologies attempted to steal our quantum encryption algorithm, the cornerstone of our merger deal. Murmurs spread around the table as Alexander continued. What's most disturbing isn't just the attempt, but how close they came to succeeding. Our security protocols failed at multiple levels. How was it discovered? Asked Eleanor Chambers, the company's longest-serving board member. Alexander paused, knowing the story would sound improbable. A 7-year-old girl overheard the conspirators discussing their plans and had the courage to warn me. Disbelieving looks passed between board members. Richard Keller, the chief financial officer, leaned forward. You're saying our $3 billion deal was saved by a child? Precisely, Alexander replied. While our highly paid security team missed multiple red flags, a little girl who was paying attention recognized a threat. The irony isn't lost on me, and it shouldn't be lost on any of you. Alexander laid out the security failures that had allowed the breach, then presented a comprehensive overhaul of their protocols. As the meeting progressed, he found himself speaking with a clarity and conviction that surprised even him. The previous day's events had shaken something loose in him, a recognition of blind spots he hadn't known existed. We've become too insular, he concluded, too confident in our systems and our people. Sometimes we need an outsider's perspective to see what we've been missing. As the board filed out after voting unanimously for his security proposals, Eleanor Chambers lingered behind. That was quite a speech, Alex. I haven't heard you speak with such passion in years. Alexander gathered his papers. Near misses have a way of sharpening one's focus. Eleanor said, studying him. And does this focus extend to the little girl and her mother? I know you, Alex. You've got that look. What look? The one you get when you found a problem you want to fix. Just remember, people aren't corporations. They can't be restructured to fit your vision. Alexander frowned. I'm simply grateful for their help. Nothing more. Eleanor patted his arm. Of course. Just be careful. Gratitude from a man in your position can be overwhelming. She paused at the door. By the way, the press got wind of the attempted breach. PR is running interference, but they'll need your input on the official statement. After she left, Alexander sat alone in the conference room, turning his phone over in his hands. Without analyzing his motives too closely, he pulled up the hotel's employee database and located Jessica Parker's address. It was in a struggling neighborhood in Queens, a world away from his Manhattan penthouse. 3 days later, Alexander stood outside a weather apartment building in Queens, feeling conspicuously out of place in his tailored suit. He debated with himself repeatedly about this visit, questioning his motives and Eleanor's warning about overwhelming gratitude. In the end, curiosity won out over caution. The building's security door had a broken lock, allowing him direct access to the stairwell. The elevator had an out-of-service sign that looked permanent. He climbed to the 4th floor, noting the peeling paint and the persistent smell of cooking oil mixed with dampness. At apartment 4C, he hesitated before knocking. Jessica opened the door, her surprise evident as she recognized him. Mr. Hayes, what are you doing here? Alexander, please, he reminded her. I was in the neighborhood and wanted to check on you both. The lie felt awkward on his lips. He hadn't been in the neighborhood of Queens in years. Jessica's expression made it clear she didn't believe him either, but she opened the door wider. Please come in. I apologize for the mess. The apartment was small but meticulously clean. A futon sofa dominated the living room, with a small kitchen table pushed against one wall. School books and art supplies were neatly stacked on a repurposed coffee table. Despite the obvious financial constraints, there were touches of warmth everywhere. Hand-painted picture frames, colorful throw pillows, and Emma's artwork proudly displayed on the refrigerator. Emma's at her after-school program, Jessica explained, clearing textbooks from the kitchen table. I've been studying between shifts. She gestured to the nursing textbooks. You're in school? Alexander asked, taking a seat at the small table. Jessica nodded, putting on a kettle for tea. Part-time at community college. I'm working toward a nursing degree. It's taking longer than I planned, but we're making it work. Alexander noted the careful budgeting notebook beside the textbooks, the stack of bills held together with a paperclip, the worn edges of the furniture. The apartment was clean and functional, but showed signs of prolonged financial strain. How long have you been at the Grand Plaza? He asked, accepting the mug of tea she offered. Almost 7 months. The hours work with Emma's school schedule, and the pay is better than my last position. Jessica sat across from him, her posture still carrying the wariness of someone unaccustomed to entertaining billionaires in her kitchen. And your second job? I work evenings at an urgent care clinic 3 days a week. It's entry level, but it gives me practical experience in the medical field. She hesitated, then asked directly, Mr. Hayes, Alexander, why are you really here? He considered several polished responses before settling on honesty. I'm not entirely sure. I've been thinking about what Emma said about rich people not noticing people like you. It bothered me. Jessica's expression softened slightly. She's 7. Children see the world in black and white. But she wasn't wrong, was she? Alexander ran his finger along a chip in the mug. I've built a company worth billions, yet I've never given much thought to the lives of the people who clean my hotel rooms or serve my coffee. That's not unusual. People naturally focus on their immediate surroundings. Perhaps, but it's a failure of perspective nevertheless. He looked up at her. Your daughter changed that, at least for me. She made me visible to you, and in turn, made you visible to me. Jessica studied him, her expression unreadable. And now that we're visible, before Alexander could answer, they heard the apartment door open, followed by the sound of small feet running down the hallway. Mom, Mrs. Wilson let me bring home the class fish for the weekend, and Emma stopped abruptly in the doorway, her eyes widening at the sight of their visitor. Mr. Hayes. She was carrying a small fish bowl with both hands, water sloshing dangerously close to the rim. Alexander instinctively rose to help, taking the bowl and setting it safely on the counter. Hello, Emma. That's quite a responsibility you've been given. Emma nodded solemnly. His name is Bubbles. He's a better fish. We have to feed him exactly 3 pellets twice a day or he'll get sick. That sounds very precise. I'm sure you'll take excellent care of him. Emma beamed, then looked between her mother and Alexander with curiosity. Are you here for dinner? We're having spaghetti. Mom makes the best sauce, but we have to save some for tomorrow too. Jessica touched her daughter's shoulder gently. Mr. Hayes just stopped by to check on us, honey. I'm sure he has other dinner plans. Alexander found himself reluctant to leave this small, warm apartment and return to his empty penthouse. Actually, I don't have plans. I'd love to stay for spaghetti if that's all right. Jessica looked momentarily flustered, but Emma was already pulling plates from the cabinet. You can help me set the table. Do you know how to fold napkins into swans? My mom showed me how. To Jessica's evident surprise, Alexander rolled up his sleeves and followed Emma's instructions. The absurdity of the situation, a Fortune 500 CEO folding paper napkins at a tiny kitchen table in Queens, wasn't lost on him, but for the first time in years, he felt no need to check his phone or review mental checklists of tasks and obligations. During dinner, Emma dominated the conversation with stories from school, while Jessica occasionally steered her away from particularly exuberant tangents. Alexander found himself laughing more than he had in months, especially when Emma demonstrated her spaghetti slurping technique with elaborate sound effects. Emma manners, Jessica reminded her, though her own eyes crinkled with amusement. It's fine, Alexander assured her. My dinner companions are usually too concerned with impressing me to show their spaghetti slurping techniques. After dinner, Emma insisted on showing Alexander her art portfolio, a worn folder bursting with colorful drawings. He examined each one with genuine interest, recognizing her talent for capturing expression and movement despite her young age. This one's my favorite, Emma said, pulling out a drawing of 3 stick figures holding hands in front of a house with an impossibly large sun overhead. Is this your family? Alexander asked. Emma's expression dimmed slightly. It's me and Mom. And this, she pointed to the 3rd figure, is the dad I wish I had, one who stays and reads stories and doesn't make Mom cry. Emma, Jessica said softly, her cheeks flushing, that's enough show and tell for tonight. It's time to feed Bubbles and get ready for bed. As Emma carefully counted fish pellets into the bowl, Jessica turned to Alexander with embarrassment. I'm sorry about that. Her father left when she was 3. She doesn't remember much about him, but she's at an age where she notices other families. No apologies necessary, Alexander said. She's remarkably perceptive. After Emma reluctantly went to prepare for bed, insisting Alexander would still be there when she returned, Jessica began clearing the table. Let me help, he offered, gathering plates. You really don't have to. This isn't exactly what you're used to. Which makes it all the more refreshing. He rolled up his sleeves further and began rinsing dishes. When was the last time you took a night off, Jessica? She laughed softly. A night off? I'm not sure I remember what that means. You're working 2 jobs and going to school while raising a remarkable daughter. That's more impressive than anything I've accomplished. Jessica paused, a dish towel in her hands. That's kind of you to say, but we both know it's not true. You've built an empire. I'm just trying to keep our heads above water. An empire that almost came crashing down because I missed what was right in front of me. Alexander handed her the last plate. There's different kinds of success, Jessica. I'm beginning to think I've been measuring mine with the wrong metrics. Their conversation was interrupted by Emma calling from the bathroom, needing help with a stubborn pajama button. Jessica excused herself, leaving Alexander alone in the small kitchen. He surveyed the apartment again, seeing it with new eyes. Despite its limitations, it held something his penthouse lacked, a sense of home. The worn sofa had clearly hosted countless bedtime stories. The refrigerator artwork represented hours of creative joy. Even the chipped mugs told a story of consistent use rather than decorative display. When Jessica returned, Alexander was checking his watch. I should be going. Thank you for dinner and the conversation. Emma wants to say goodnight. She's quite taken with you. Alexander followed Jessica to a small bedroom where Emma was already tucked under a faded quilt covered in stars. A nightlight cast a soft glow across the room, illuminating bookshelves filled with well-loved volumes. Mr. Hayes, Mom said you have to go, but will you come back sometime? I can show you my school and introduce you to Mrs. Wilson and Bubbles' fish friends. Alexander found himself nodding before he could consider the implications. I'd like that, Emma. Thank you for sharing your spaghetti and your artwork with me. Mom says sharing makes your heart bigger, Emma said, yawning. Is your heart bigger now? The question, simple and profound, caught him off guard. I think it might be, yes. As Alexander left the apartment building, the contrast between his world and theirs couldn't have been more stark. Yet something had shifted in his perception. The success he'd pursued relentlessly now seemed hollow compared to the genuine connection he'd witnessed between mother and daughter. Back in his penthouse, Alexander stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. His phone buzzed continuously with messages and emails demanding attention, but for once, they seemed less important than the memory of paper napkin swans and a child's drawing of the family she wished for. Over the next few weeks, Alexander found himself drawn back to the small apartment in Queens with increasing frequency. What began as occasional visits evolved into a regular Saturday routine. He would arrive with groceries, despite Jessica's initial protests, help Emma with her science projects, and often stay for dinner. For the first time in decades, Alexander Hayes had somewhere to be that wasn't tied to business obligations or social positioning. Corporate life continued at its relentless pace. The merger was proceeding, security protocols had been overhauled, and Hayes Enterprises' stock was at an all-time high. But Alexander found his priorities shifting in subtle ways. He began declining evening events, rescheduling Sunday conference calls, and actually using his vacation days. Changes that didn't go unnoticed by his executive team. The board is getting restless, Marcus Davis informed him one afternoon. There are whispers about your distraction. Alexander looked up from his desk, where he'd been reviewing quarterly projections. Distraction? Davis shifted uncomfortably. Your visits to Queens, sir. The time you're spending with the hotel employee and her daughter. It hasn't gone unnoticed. Alexander's expression hardened. I wasn't aware that my personal time was subject to board approval. It's not about approval, sir. It's about perception. Several board members have expressed concern that these relationships might affect your judgment or create conflicts of interest. These relationships saved our company from a devastating breach, Alexander reminded him sharply, and my judgment has delivered record profits for 10 consecutive quarters. Davis nodded, backing down. Of course, sir, I'm just conveying the concerns. After Davis left, Alexander sat back in his chair, troubled by the conversation. He hadn't considered how his growing connection to Jessica and Emma might be perceived by his corporate world. The two spheres of his life had remained largely separate, until now. His phone chimed with a text from Jessica. Emma's school called. She has a fever. I'm stuck in nursing clinical and can't leave. Is there any chance you could check on her? The after-school program will keep her in the nurse's office until someone picks her up. Without hesitation, Alexander cancelled his remaining meetings and headed to Emma's elementary school in Queens. He found her curled on a cot in the nurse's office, her normally vibrant energy diminished by illness. "Alexander," she exclaimed weakly when she saw him, "did Mom send you?" She did. "She's learning important nursing skills today and couldn't get away." He pressed a hand to her forehead, finding it worryingly warm. "Let's get you home and comfortable." The school nurse seemed skeptical when Alexander identified himself, but Emma's obvious delight at seeing him eased her concerns. After signing the necessary forms, Alexander carried Emma's backpack and offered his hand, which she took immediately. "Can we stop for popsicles?" Emma asked as they walked to his car. "Mom always gets me popsicles when I'm sick." "Popsicles it is," Alexander agreed, helping her into the back seat of his Audi. At the apartment, Alexander found himself navigating unfamiliar territory, caring for a sick child. He helped Emma change into pajamas, located the children's fever reducer in the bathroom cabinet, and made a nest of blankets on the couch where she could watch cartoons. "You're pretty good at taking care of people," Emma observed, sucking on a cherry popsicle. "Do you practice?" Alexander smiled as he placed a cool washcloth on her forehead. "Not really. I'm usually the one being taken care of by assistants and housekeepers and restaurant staff." Emma considered this. "That sounds lonely. It's better to take care of each other like me and Mom do." The simple wisdom in her statement lingered with Alexander throughout the afternoon as he worked remotely from Jessica's kitchen table, keeping one eye on Emma as she drifted in and out of sleep on the couch. When Jessica returned home that evening, she found them both asleep. Emma on the couch and Alexander in the adjacent armchair, his laptop still open on his knees. The sight stopped her in the doorway, a complex emotion catching in her throat. "Alexander," she said softly, touching his shoulder. He woke immediately, disoriented for only a moment before focusing on her face. "Jessica, how was your clinical?" "It went well. Thank you so much for coming. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't been available." Alexander closed his laptop and stretched. "It was no trouble. Her fever broke about an hour ago. She's been sleeping peacefully since then." Jessica checked on Emma, brushing hair from her daughter's forehead with a tenderness that made Alexander's chest tighten. The intimacy of the scene, this small family unit that had somehow begun to include him, felt both foreign and essential. "You must be hungry," he said, standing. "I ordered soup earlier, but there's plenty left. Let me heat it for you." In the kitchen, as Alexander warmed the soup, Jessica watched him with a guarded expression. "Alexander, what are we doing here?" He turned to face her. "What do you mean?" "This you. A billionaire CEO spending his Thursday afternoon taking care of my sick daughter, ordering soup, waiting in my apartment." She crossed her arms, not defensively but protectively. "Don't misunderstand. I'm incredibly grateful, but I need to understand what this means to you." The question deserved honesty, though Alexander wasn't sure he fully understood the answer himself. "I don't know exactly. I just know that being here, with you and Emma, feels more real than anything else in my life right now." Jessica sighed, leaning against the counter. "That's what worries me. We're not an experience, Alexander. We're not an escape from your real life or a charity project or a midlife crisis solution." "I never thought you were," he said, surprised by the suggestion. "Didn't you?" Her gaze was direct, challenging. The grocery deliveries, the offers to help with tuition, the expensive presents for Emma that I keep having to return. It feels like you're trying to fix us. Alexander was silent for a moment, absorbing the truth in her words. "I apologize if I've been overbearing. It's a professional hazard, seeing problems and applying resources to solve them." "But we're not a problem to be solved. Yes, we struggle financially. Yes, our apartment is small and our furniture is second-hand. But we're happy, Alexander. We have what matters." "I can see that," he said quietly. "Maybe that's why I keep coming back. You and Emma have something I've been missing, and I'm trying to understand what it is." Jessica's expression softened. Connection. Purpose beyond achievement. Love that doesn't depend on performance. The word love hung in the air between them, weighted with implications neither was ready to address. "I should go," Alexander said finally. "Will Emma be okay for school tomorrow? I'll keep her home one more day to be safe. I can work from here." As Alexander gathered his things, Emma stirred on the couch. "Are you leaving?" she asked sleepily. Yes, sweetheart. Your mum's home now and you're feeling better. Emma reached for his hand. Thank you for the popsicles and the stories. You're good at the voices. Anytime, Emma. He squeezed her small hand, then turned to Jessica. Call me if you need anything. At the door, Jessica stopped him. Alexander, I appreciate everything you've done today. Truly, but we need to be careful here, all of us. Emma is already getting attached to you, and if this is just a temporary fascination, it's not, he interrupted, surprising himself with his certainty. I don't know exactly what this is, Jessica, but it's not temporary. The drive back to Manhattan gave Alexander time to reflect on Jessica's concerns. She was right to question his motives. Even he wasn't entirely clear on them. Was he trying to fix their lives? Was he using them as an escape from his own carefully constructed but emotionally barren existence? Or was there something more authentic happening? A genuine connection that transcended the vast differences in their circumstances? When he arrived at his penthouse, a message was waiting from his PR director. The business press had gotten wind of his unusual friendship with a hotel maid and her daughter. Several reporters were asking for comment, framing the story as either a heartwarming human interest piece or the prelude to a potential scandal. Alexander deleted the message without responding. Let them speculate. For once in his meticulously managed life, he was following an uncharted path, guided by something other than strategic advantage or market positioning. That night, as he stood on his terrace overlooking the glittering city, Alexander realized he could see the general direction of Queens from his vantage point. Somewhere in that distant borough, in a small apartment with worn furniture and paper stars on the ceiling, was a different kind of wealth than he had ever pursued. The headline appeared in the business section first. Hayes Enterprises CEO forms unusual bond with hotel employee's family. Within days, the story had migrated to the tabloids, social media, and morning talk shows. Speculation ran rampant. Everything from secret philanthropy to scandalous affair to midlife crisis. Alexander refused all requests for comment, inflaming curiosity further. At Hayes Enterprises, the board called an emergency meeting. Alexander arrived to find them assembled, expressions ranging from concern to outright disapproval. This has gone beyond a personal matter, Alex, Eleanor Chambers began. The company's image is now involved. Richard Keller, the CFO, pushed a tablet across the table displaying one of the more salacious headlines. Our investors are getting nervous. There are questions about your judgment, your focus, even your mental stability. Alexander remained calm. My personal life is my own. My performance as CEO remains exceptional, as the quarterly results clearly demonstrate. It's not that simple, said James Whitmore, the newest board member. The Hayes brand is intertwined with your personal brand. You've cultivated an image of calculated precision for decades. This sudden deviation raises questions. Deviation, Alexander repeated, his voice cooling. Is that what we're calling basic human connection now? Eleanor leaned forward. Alex, no one is questioning your right to friendships, but the optics here are concerning. A billionaire CEO spending significant time with a hotel maid half his age and her child. The press is having a field day. Her name is Jessica Parker, Alexander said evenly. She's a nursing student working 2 jobs to support her daughter while pursuing an education. The hotel maid you dismiss so easily showed more integrity and intelligence than half the executives in this building. A tense silence fell over the room. Finally, Whitmore spoke again. The communications team has drafted a statement positioning this as a mentorship program, part of your commitment to supporting working families. It presents the relationship in a positive light while creating appropriate distance. Alexander stood, straightening his jacket. I won't be issuing any statement, crafted or otherwise. My private life remains private. Now, unless there are actual business matters to discuss, I have a company to run. As the meeting dissolved into uncomfortable murmurs, Eleanor followed Alexander to his office. That wasn't your most diplomatic performance, she observed, closing the door behind her. Alexander sighed, the rigid posture relaxing slightly. They want me to disavow the only genuine relationship I've formed in years, Eleanor. All to protect an image that feels increasingly hollow. Is that what this is? A genuine relationship? She studied him carefully. Or is it a rebellion against the life you've built? Can't it be both? Alexander sat behind his desk, suddenly weary. I've spent 30 years accumulating wealth and power, and for what? An empty penthouse and board meetings where people analyze my deviations from acceptable behavior? Eleanor's expression softened. You know I care about you, Alex. I've watched you build this company from nothing. But I've also watched you sacrifice everything personal along the way, relationships, family, even basic joy. If Jessica and her daughter are changing that, I'm glad. But tread carefully. Lives are at stake here, not just stock prices. After Eleanor left, Alexander received a text from Jessica. Have you seen the news? Reporters outside our apartment building. Emma, frightened, not sure what to do. Alexander immediately called his head of security, arranging for a private security detail to escort Jessica and Emma safely to and from work and school. Then he called Jessica directly. I'm so sorry about this, he said when she answered. I never imagined the press would harass you. Neither did I, Jessica replied, her voice tight with stress. Emma's teacher called. Reporters were asking questions at the school. This is getting out of control, Alexander. I've arranged for security to keep them at a distance, but Jessica, this will likely get worse before it gets better. The media cycle is relentless. There was a long pause before Jessica spoke again. Maybe we should take a step back. Give things time to cool down. The suggestion sent an unexpected pang through Alexander's chest. Is that what you want? What I want is for my daughter to feel safe, for my neighbors to stop giving me strange looks, for my co-workers to stop whispering when I enter a room. Her voice cracked slightly. I didn't ask for any of this attention. I understand, Alexander said quietly. Whatever you need, I'll respect. After they disconnected, Alexander sat motionless at his desk, confronting emotions he rarely permitted himself to acknowledge. The prospect of losing his connection to Jessica and Emma left a hollow feeling he couldn't rationalize away with business logic or strategic thinking. His intercom buzzed. Sir, Ms. Diane Foster from Communications is here about the press statement. Send her in, Alexander said, making a sudden decision. When the communications director entered with her tablet of prepared statements, Alexander waved them away. I've changed my mind. We will issue a statement, but not the one the board approved. Sir, I want a statement that makes my position absolutely clear. Hayes Enterprises does not comment on the personal lives of its executives or employees. Any harassment of individuals connected to me will be met with immediate legal action. My private relationships are not corporate assets to be managed or media commodities to be exploited. Diane blinked, clearly taken aback. That's quite direct, Mr. Hayes. The board was hoping for something that would frame this situation more positively. The board is concerned with optics. I'm concerned with ethics. Draft the statement and bring it back to me within the hour. After she left, Alexander made another call, this one to his personal attorney. Gerald, I need you to set something up for me. A trust fund, independent of my company holdings, and I want to explore guardianship options. Hypothetically for now, but with all paperwork prepared if needed. Guardianship? Gerald sounded surprised. May I ask for whom? A 7-year-old girl. The daughter of a friend who may need support. That evening, Alexander cancelled his usual car service and took the subway to Queens, hoping to avoid drawing attention. The security team he'd hired reported that the media presence had diminished after several residents called the police, but he remained cautious. When he arrived at Jessica's building, he found them preparing dinner as usual, though the atmosphere was heavy with unspoken tension. Emma ran to hug him, seemingly unaffected by the day's stress. Alexander, Mom said we have to be extra careful because there are people taking pictures of us now. Are we famous? He knelt to her level. Some people are curious about us, that's all, but they'll get bored soon and go away. Emma considered this. Is it because you're rich and we're not? Alexander exchanged a glance with Jessica over Emma's head. Partly. Some people think that people from different backgrounds shouldn't be friends. That's stupid, Emma declared. My best friend Zoe has 2 moms and lives in a big house, and I live with just my mom in an apartment, but we're still best friends. Exactly, Alexander agreed, and that's all that matters. During dinner, he noticed Jessica was quieter than usual, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. After Emma went to finish homework, she finally spoke frankly. My supervisor called me in today. They're concerned about my connection to you and how it might affect the hotel's reputation. I'm being moved to a different floor, away from the executive suites. Alexander's jaw tightened. That's completely unacceptable. I'll speak with hotel management immediately. No! Jessica's response was sharp. That's exactly what I don't want. I don't need you fighting my battles or using your influence. That only confirms what everyone is whispering, that I'm using you somehow or you're using me. Jessica, I'm just trying to help. I know. Her expression softened slightly, but help looks different from where I stand. I've spent years building independence, teaching Emma that we solve our own problems. I can't suddenly become someone who needs rescuing by a powerful man. Alexander was silent, absorbing the rebuke. What can I do then? There must be something. Jessica hesitated, then reached across the table to touch his hand briefly. Just be patient. This attention will fade eventually. And maybe we need to be more careful about boundaries until it does. Boundaries, Alexander repeated, the word tasting bitter. For Emma's sake, if nothing else, she's already so attached to you. If this situation forces you to withdraw completely... She didn't finish the thought. Alexander nodded slowly, understanding the fear beneath her words. Emma had already lost one father figure. Jessica was protecting her from losing another. I won't disappear, he promised, no matter what the press says or the board threatens, but I'll respect whatever limits you need to set. As he prepared to leave, Emma emerged from her room with a folded paper. I made this for you, she said, presenting it proudly. Alexander unfolded it to find a drawing of 3 figures, standing before what appeared to be both a small apartment building and a skyscraper somehow merged together. The figures were labeled Mom, Me, and Alexander. It's our 3-person family, Emma explained. We can live in both places. Alexander's throat tightened unexpectedly. It's beautiful, Emma, thank you. As he walked to the subway, the drawing carefully protected in his briefcase, Alexander found himself at a crossroads. For decades, he had defined himself through achievement and acquisition. Now, he was being asked to demonstrate a different kind of strength, the patience to let a relationship develop naturally, without the power of his position or wealth to expedite it. Back at his penthouse, he found Eleanor waiting in the lobby. Her expression told him she already knew about his unauthorized press statement. The board is furious, she said, without preamble as they rode the elevator. Whitmore is calling for a vote of no confidence. Let him, Alexander replied calmly. My controlling interest makes it a futile gesture. It's not just about voting power, Alex, it's about trust. The team needs to believe you're making decisions for the company's benefit, not personal reasons. When they reached his penthouse, Alexander poured them both a drink. What if the best thing for the company is for its CEO to remember his humanity, Eleanor? What if the single-minded focus that built Hayes Enterprises isn't what will sustain it? Eleanor accepted the glass, studying him with concern. You're changing, Alex. I'm just not sure everyone is ready for that change, including Jessica and her daughter. Perhaps not, Alexander conceded. But for the first time in years, I'm making choices based on what matters most, not what appears most advantageous. After Eleanor left, Alexander stood at his window, the city lights blurring as he contemplated the fragile connection he'd formed with Jessica and Emma, and the forces aligning to test it. The media storm intensified over the following weeks, despite Alexander's stern statement. Photographers lurked near Jessica's apartment, Emma's school, and the hotel. Old acquaintances of Jessica's emerged with embellished stories, while financial analysts speculated about Alexander's mental state and its potential impact on Hayes Enterprises' stock performance. For Jessica, the scrutiny became increasingly difficult to bear. Her transfer to a different floor at the hotel brought whispers and stares from co-workers. Parents at Emma's school alternated between excessive friendliness and suspicious distance. The simple life she had carefully constructed was unraveling around her. After a particularly difficult day when Emma came home crying because classmates had teased her about being on a tabloid cover, Jessica made a painful decision. She called Alexander late that evening after Emma was asleep. I think we need a real break, she said, her voice strained. Not just boundaries, actual distance. Emma is suffering and I can't bear it. The silence on Alexander's end lasted so long, she thought the connection had dropped. Finally, he spoke. I understand. What can I do to make this easier for you both? Nothing, Jessica replied. That's the point, Alexander. Your help, your presence, it's the source of this chaos. We need to go back to our normal lives. And if I can't? The vulnerability in his voice was startling. If I can't just return to my normal life now that I know what I've been missing? Jessica closed her eyes, fighting her own conflicted emotions. You have to, for Emma's sake, if not your own. After they disconnected, Jessica sat in her darkened living room, wondering if she had just made the biggest mistake of her life. The connection with Alexander had become meaningful, not just to Emma, but to her as well. A bridge to possibilities she'd never allowed herself to consider. Across the city, Alexander stood motionless in his penthouse, phone still in hand. The rational part of his mind understood Jessica's decision completely. He had brought disruption and unwanted attention into their carefully balanced lives. The proper response would be to respect her wishes, withdraw gracefully and allow the media storm to subside. But for perhaps the first time in his adult life, Alexander found himself unwilling to follow the rational path. The thought of returning to his former existence, the endless meetings, strategic dinners and hollow achievements, felt not just unappealing, but impossible. The next morning, Alexander called an emergency meeting of his executive team. They arrived expecting damage control for the latest media speculation. Instead, they found their CEO unusually relaxed, sitting at the conference table rather than standing at its head. "I'm taking a leave of absence," he announced without preamble. Effective immediately for a period of 3 months. The room erupted in protests and questions. Alexander raised a hand for silence. "This isn't negotiable. Eleanor will serve as interim CEO. I've already drafted the necessary paperwork." Richard Keller leaned forward, his expression incredulous. "This is because of that woman and her daughter, isn't it? You're throwing away everything you've built for some fantasy of domestic bliss?" Alexander's gaze hardened. "Careful, Richard. You're speaking about people who are important to me. Important enough to abandon your company, your responsibilities, the thousands of employees who depend on your leadership? I'm not abandoning anything. I'm taking a step back to gain perspective." Alexander looked around the table. "For 30 years, I've given everything to this company. My time, my energy, my personal life. I've missed funerals and birthdays and relationships because nothing was as important as Hayes Enterprises." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "I don't regret building this company, but I do regret the singular focus that made me believe nothing else mattered. It took a 7-year-old girl to show me what I've been missing." After the meeting, Eleanor followed him to his office. "Are you sure about this, Alex? 3 months is a long time in our industry." "I'm sure." He handed her a file containing transition plans and contingency measures. "The company will survive without me, Eleanor. It needs to, or I've failed as a leader." "And what will you do with this time? Jessica has asked for space." Alexander nodded. "I know, and I'll respect that. But there are other things that need my attention, things I've been ignoring for too long." The following day, as news of Alexander's leave of absence sent Hayes Enterprises stock into temporary freefall, he was boarding a flight to Seattle. His mother's sister, his only surviving relative, had been sending him Christmas cards for decades, each one acknowledged with a polite but distant response. At 78, Aunt Margaret was his last connection to a family he had systematically deprioritized in pursuit of success. She was surprised but welcoming when he arrived unannounced at her modest home. Over the next week, Alexander reconnected with stories of his parents before wealth and ambition had defined their lives. He saw photographs he'd never seen, heard anecdotes that humanized the distant figures in his memory, and began to understand the legacy of disconnection he had inherited and perfected. "Your father was the same way," Margaret told him over tea in her garden. "Brilliant, driven, always looking toward the next achievement. He missed so much, Alex. He was planning expansions on his deathbed." "Did he regret it, do you think?" Alexander asked. Margaret considered the question carefully. "I think he didn't know how to measure success any other way. The question is, do you?" From Seattle, Alexander traveled to the small Michigan town where he'd grown up before his father's business success had moved them to Manhattan. The house was gone, replaced by a convenience store, but the neighborhood remained. Ordinary families living ordinary lives that suddenly seemed extraordinary in their connectedness. Throughout these weeks of personal archaeology, Alexander maintained his promise to give Jessica and Emma space. No calls, no texts, no surprise visits. The media attention gradually subsided in his absence. new scandals and stories taking precedence over a billionaire's unconventional friendship. But he sent one letter each week, handwritten, delivered without fanfare. To Emma, he sent stories about the places he visited, sketches of interesting buildings, and once a pressed flower from his aunt's garden. To Jessica, his letters were more measured, respecting her request for distance while gently asserting his continued presence in their lives. "I'm learning patience," he wrote in one letter. "It's not a virtue that came naturally to me. In business, I solved problems through immediate action and resources. But some things can't be rushed or purchased. Trust, understanding, the natural evolution of feelings. I'm giving you the space you asked for, but I want you to know that space doesn't equal absence. Wherever I am, whatever I'm doing, you and Emma remain in my thoughts." 6 weeks into his leave of absence, Alexander received an unexpected call from Eleanor. "Westbrook is making another move," she said, without greeting. "They've acquired enough proxy votes to potentially block the merger. The board is getting nervous." Alexander sighed, gazing out the window of his hotel room in Chicago, the latest stop in his journey. "The merger agreement is solid, Eleanor. Westbrook is bluffing." "Maybe. But the team would feel better with you back in New York. Your absence is being interpreted as weakness. My absence is exactly what it appears to be, a CEO taking time to recalibrate. The company will weather this just fine." After ending the call, Alexander found himself at a familiar crossroads. The old Alexander would have immediately flown back to New York, reasserted control, and crushed Westbrook's latest maneuver with ruthless efficiency. The business world expected nothing less from him, but the man he was becoming recognized this as the test it was, of his new priorities, his evolving definition of success, and the leadership culture he had created at Hayes Enterprises. Instead of booking a flight to New York, he called Marcus Davis, his head of security. "I need information on Jessica and Emma Parker, not surveillance, just confirmation that they're safe and managing." Davis's report was reassuring. The media had largely moved on. Jessica was continuing her nursing studies and had received a small promotion at the hotel. Emma was doing well in school, though her teacher had noticed she still occasionally drew pictures, featuring a tall man holding hands with her and her mother. That night, Alexander wrote another letter, this one different from the others. "Dear Jessica," he began. "These weeks apart have given me time to reflect on who I am and who I want to be. I've visited family I've neglected, places I've forgotten, and memories I've ignored. Through it all, one truth has become increasingly clear. The connection I feel with you and Emma isn't a diversion or a crisis or a rebellion against my former life. It's the most authentic thing I've experienced in decades. I know you needed space, and I've respected that. I will continue to respect whatever boundaries you set, but I also want to be honest about my feelings. You and Emma brought something essential back into my life, something I didn't even realize was missing until I met you both. Whether or not I have a place in your future, you have permanently changed mine. I have 2 more weeks of travel planned. After that, I'll be returning to New York. I don't expect an answer or a decision from you. I simply wanted you to know where I stand. Whatever happens next is entirely your choice." He signed it simply Alexander, sealed the envelope, and arranged for its delivery without corporate couriers or expensive messengers, just regular mail like any ordinary man might send. The following morning, he received another call from Eleanor, her voice tense with concern. "Alex, there's something you should know. Jessica Parker has resigned from the Grand Plaza. According to HR, she's left New York entirely." Alexander felt the news like a physical blow. "Did she leave a forwarding address? Any indication of where she was going?" "Nothing. She simply gave notice and left." "I'm sorry, Alex." After the call ended, Alexander stood at the window of his Chicago hotel room, watching the city below with unseeing eyes. Had his letters pushed Jessica further away? Had the persistent media attention finally become too much? Or was this simply her way of drawing a clear final boundary? For the first time in his life, Alexander Hayes found himself without a strategic response to a significant loss. No amount of resources or influence could compel Jessica to return if she had decided their connection was too costly for her and Emma. The realization left him feeling more vulnerable than any business setback ever had. 2 months and 28 days after beginning his leave of absence, Alexander Hayes returned to New York. The city welcomed him with its familiar energy, Relentless, demanding, indifferent to personal transformations, his penthouse remained exactly as he had left it, meticulously maintained by staff who had kept his life in perfect order, even in his absence. Yet everything felt different. The emptiness of the spacious rooms now seemed less like minimalist luxury and more like an absence of life. The panoramic views that had once represented achievement now highlighted his isolation above the city's vibrant connections. At Hayes Enterprises, his return was met with a mixture of relief and wariness. The company had not only survived without him, but had successfully countered Westbrook's maneuvers and strengthened the merger terms. Eleanor had proven herself more than capable as interim leader, instituting several innovations that Alexander immediately recognized as improvements. "You should be proud," he told her during their transition meeting. "You've done exceptional work." Eleanor studied him carefully. "You seem different, Alex, more at peace somehow." "I am." He smiled, the expression reaching his eyes in a way it rarely had before, though not necessarily in the way I expected to be. "Any word from Jessica?" Alexander shook his head. "Nothing. She's made her choice and I respect it. Some lessons aren't about getting what you want. So what now? Back to business as usual?" "Business, yes. Usual? I don't think that's possible anymore." Alexander looked out at the Manhattan skyline from his office window. "I've been thinking about legacy, Eleanor. Not just corporate achievements, but meaningful impact." In the weeks that followed, Alexander gradually re-immersed himself in the company's operations, but with a noticeably different approach. He established more reasonable working hours for himself and his executive team. He initiated a comprehensive review of employee benefits, particularly focusing on childcare support and educational assistance. He began having regular lunches in the company cafeteria, learning the names and stories of employees at all levels. The board watched these changes with a mixture of confusion and cautious approval. The feared instability had not materialized. Instead, Alexander seemed more focused and strategic than ever, but with a newfound emphasis on sustainable growth and corporate responsibility. 3 months after his return, Alexander was preparing for a major presentation when his assistant interrupted with an unusual message. "Sir, there's a Miss Parker here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she's quite insistent." Alexander froze, his heart suddenly racing. "Jessica Parker?" "Yes, sir. She says it's important." "Send her in immediately." Alexander stood as the office door opened, revealing Jessica in a simple dress, her hair longer than he remembered, her expression a complex mixture of determination and uncertainty. "Jessica," he said softly, moving around his desk, "I didn't expect to see you again." "I know." She remained near the door, maintaining a careful distance. "I wasn't sure I would come, but there are things that need to be said in person." Alexander gestured to the seating area by the window. "Please." As they sat across from each other, Alexander noticed subtle changes in her appearance, a new confidence in her posture, a calmness that hadn't been there before. "Where did you go?" he asked. "Eleanor told me you left the hotel, left New York." "Boston," Jessica replied. "My sister lives there. She's been asking me to move closer for years, and with everything that happened..." She paused, gathering her thoughts. It seemed like the right time for a fresh start. "And Emma, how is she?" A small smile touched Jessica's lips. "She's good. Thriving, actually. She loves her new school, has made friends quickly. She's resilient. I'm glad." Alexander hesitated, then added, "I've missed you both. More than I expected was possible." Jessica's eyes met his, unwavering. "I got your letters. All of them. I wasn't sure. I read them many times. They helped me understand what was happening between us, what you were going through." Alexander leaned forward slightly. "Why did you come back, Jessica?" She took a deep breath. "To tell you that leaving wasn't about rejecting you. It was about finding clarity, away from the media circus, away from the power imbalance between us, away from the whispers and assumptions. I needed to know that whatever I felt for you wasn't influenced by your position or wealth, that Emma's attachment wasn't about the excitement of your world." "And what did you discover?" "That distance didn't diminish what we feel." Jessica's voice softened. "Emma still draws you in her family pictures. She still tells stories about when Alexander made pancakes or when Alexander helped with my science project. You became important to her in ways that have nothing to do with your status. Hope flickered in Alexander's chest, but he kept his expression measured. And for you? Jessica smiled, a full, genuine smile that transformed her face. I discovered that I missed the man who folded napkins into swans and listened to my nursing school anxieties and looked at my daughter like she was the most important person in the room. Not the CEO or the billionaire, just Alexander. I've been trying to become more of that man, he said quietly. The one worthy of being in your lives. I know. I've been following your company's changes, the expanded parental leave policy, the scholarship program for employees' children, the new emphasis on work-life balance. Those aren't coincidences. Alexander shook his head. No. They're lessons I should have learned long ago. Better late than never, I suppose. Jessica reached into her bag and withdrew a folded paper. Emma made this for you. She doesn't know I'm here today, but she's been working on it for weeks. Alexander unfolded the drawing carefully. It showed 3 figures, clearly Jessica, Emma, and himself, standing before what appeared to be a house. Above them, written in a child's careful printing, were the words, "My real family." She's never stopped seeing you as part of our lives, Jessica said softly, even when I tried to explain why we needed to move away. Alexander touched the drawing gently. And now? What happens now, Jessica? That depends. She met his gaze directly. On whether you meant what you wrote in your letters, about patience, about respecting boundaries, about understanding that real connections can't be rushed or managed like business acquisitions. I meant every word. Jessica nodded, as if confirming something to herself. Then I propose we start again. Not with grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but with something simpler. Emma has a school play next Friday in Boston. She's playing a tree with exactly 2 lines, but she's been practicing for weeks. She would love for you to be there. The invitation, so ordinary and yet so profound, brought unexpected emotion to Alexander's throat. I would be honored, and after that, perhaps dinner at our new apartment. It's small, but it has a balcony with a view of the park. It sounds perfect. Jessica stood, gathering her bag. I should go. I promised Emma I'd be back tonight. Alexander walked her to the door, fighting the urge to pull her into an embrace, to make grand promises about their future. Instead, he simply asked, "May I call you tomorrow to get the details for the play?" "I'd like that." She hesitated at the threshold, then added, "This won't be easy, Alexander. There will still be challenges, differences in our worlds, public interest, Emma's needs as she grows. The most valuable things rarely come easily," he replied, "but they're worth the effort." After Jessica left, Alexander returned to the window, looking out at the city with new eyes. For decades, he had measured success in acquisitions, market share, and profit margins. Now he understood that the true measure lay elsewhere, in connections formed, in lives touched, in the courage to remain open to transformation. That evening, as he left the office earlier than his usual hour, Alexander stopped by Eleanor's office. She looked up in surprise as he placed a small gift box on her desk. "What's this for?" "A token of appreciation for your leadership during my absence, and a more permanent arrangement if you're interested." He smiled at her confusion. "I'm restructuring the executive team. You'll remain as acting CEO 3 days a week, while I focus on our foundation and strategic initiatives." Eleanor opened the box to find a new business card with her name and the title Co-Chief Executive Officer. "Alex, are you sure about this?" "More sure than I've been about anything in years." He moved toward the door. "We'll discuss details tomorrow. Right now I have an apartment to find in Boston." "Boston?" Eleanor's eyebrows rose. "Not giving up the penthouse, I hope." "Not giving up, expanding." Alexander smiled. "It seems I need to be in 2 places for a while, until certain boundaries become more flexible." As he left the building, Alexander's phone chimed with a text from Jessica, a photo of Emma holding up a handmade card that read, "Can't wait to see you," surrounded by colorful stars and hearts. In that moment, standing on the bustling Manhattan sidewalk, Alexander Hayes, billionaire CEO, corporate titan, a man who had spent decades building walls around his emotions, felt something he had almost forgotten existed: pure, uncomplicated joy. 1 year later, Alexander stood on the balcony of a brownstone in Boston's Back Bay neighborhood, watching Jessica help Emma with a science project spread across the dining table. The past 12 months had brought changes none of them could have predicted. a carefully balanced life between two cities, gradual integration of their worlds, and the slow, deliberate nurturing of trust and understanding. Hayes Enterprises continued to thrive under the shared leadership model, with Alexander focusing on long-term vision while Eleanor managed day-to-day operations. The company's new emphasis on family support and work-life balance had attracted top talent and positive press, transforming its corporate culture from within. Jessica had completed her nursing degree with honors and accepted a position at a prestigious Boston hospital, her confidence growing with each professional achievement. Emma had blossomed in her new school, her artistic talents earning recognition and her natural empathy making her a favorite among teachers and classmates alike. The media had eventually tired of their story, especially when it failed to produce the scandal or drama they had anticipated. Occasionally, business publications would mention Alexander's non-traditional family arrangement as a sidebar to articles about Hayes Enterprises, but the frenzy had subsided to a manageable hum. "Alexander," Emma called from inside, "we need your help with the solar system. Mom keeps putting the planets in the wrong order." "That was one time," Jessica protested, laughing. "And Pluto isn't even a planet anymore, which is still confusing." Alexander joined them at the table, sliding into what had become his place in their small family unit. "Let me see what we're working with here." As he helped Emma position tiny planets around a painted sun, Alexander reflected on the journey that had brought him here. He had spent decades believing that power came from control, over markets, over competitors, over emotions. Now he understood that true strength lay in vulnerability, in opening himself to connections that couldn't be managed by strategic planning or financial resources. Later that evening, after Emma had gone to bed, Alexander and Jessica sat together on the balcony, sharing a comfortable silence as the city lights flickered around them. "I got another offer today," Jessica said eventually. "Chief nursing officer at Boston Memorial. It would mean more responsibility, longer hours." "You should take it," Alexander replied without hesitation. "You've earned it." Jessica turned to study his face. "It would change our routine. I'd need more help with Emma on certain days." "Then we'll adapt. That's what families do." "Families," Jessica repeated softly. "Is that what we are now, after all this time?" Alexander reached for her hand, entwining their fingers. "I think we've been a family since the day Emma marched into my conference room to warn me about corporate spies. We just took the scenic route to accepting it." Jessica laughed, leaning against his shoulder. "A very scenic route, with quite a few detours." "The best journeys usually have those," Alexander said, gazing at the starlit sky. "Otherwise, how would you know you've arrived exactly where you're meant to be?" In the apartment behind them, Emma's artwork covered the refrigerator, drawings of their unconventional family in various settings, testimonies to a child's acceptance of love in whatever form it takes. On top was her most recent creation, a portrait of the three of them with "My Family," written in colorful letters above. Alexander Hayes, once defined solely by the empire he had built, now measured his success by different metrics entirely. By a child's laughter, by the trust in Jessica's eyes, and by the profound understanding that the most valuable legacies aren't built in boardrooms, but in moments of connection, courage, and open hearts.